horse or you got to come by the water, okay? This is the bed where he stayed, and this is, he could entertain his guests, he could play backgammon, he could read books, and then naturally that's the chamber pot. You see how the floors are? Because they had, one thing I didn't tell you, is because this family, Mr. Phillips, because he was import-export, he had to create a store. Now this is a store we're going to go into, and I'll tell you one thing that I forgot to tell you. There were 200 tenant farmers here. The stipulation was, King George said, if you can get 200 tenant farmers to come, lease the land, and to grow corn and wheat, you know, corn, and that's what they did. So what he figured that they couldn't go anywhere to buy anything, he must, because he's import-export, he must supply a store where they could purchase things, okay? And that's what he did. So the 200 tenant farmers, we have a list. And if you go here, this is where you would come into the store, and you could purchase anything here for things. And I love, I mean, from, for the tenant farmers. This is especially, where is my, especially here. This would be your own personal shaving dish. Oh, wow. It goes up under your neck, and it would strap around, and you would hold it like this, and you would shave and look in the mirror. This is what I call high tech, 1680, yeah. And they're creating your own shaving bowl. And over here, right here, these were the brooms made by the Native Americans. Native Americans were always here. That's why you see brooms like this, and you saw them downstairs. And I'll show you one that has been used as an antique. If you were a tenant farmer and you built your house, you could purchase this, and you could also purchase hinges for your window. These little things called a juice heart goes into your mouth and makes that little funky sound. This is for scooping up what?
Crumbs.
No, this is for scooping. See the hole? This is for cream. The cream would be caught up in here, and then you could churn more butter. And then everything was labeled Adolph Phillips because he was the one that inherited the house. And you could also purchase otter and beaver because the Native Americans were always skinned. They were always trapping. And this is where you would find it, okay? Some of this from the floor. What else? This is the side that was built 1680. That's why you see all this AP. Now, if you look over here, this was something that they imported. So they would never, this is something that if you wanted curtains or something for your wife, you could purchase anything here. But it was always 10%. And this little, one of the guys here made this cane for me because I had the surgery while I was here. But unfortunately, the cow is not alive, but he willed me the horn to lean on. And I've had this cane, well, I've been here like, well, maybe 7 years. So I've had this, and it was made out of the red oak. We had 2 red oak trees, I think. That one's there, and that one's there. And the oak is one of the strongest woods that you could find. Okay?
Now I see outside that there was one tree, I don't remember where it was this way, it almost looks like it's been here for a while, like a witness tree. Oh. That one big one outside.
It probably is. Yeah. The oak is over here, okay. But it might be,
I'm trying to remember where we came in, yeah, it was back this way.
It might be, what's the other tree that they had on the other property? Sycamore?
Sycamore, yeah.
They last a long time.
That looked like a witness tree, it was here for at least 250 years.
Yes, and if it could talk.
Yeah.
Now, when they built this side, you have to remember, the slaves were not builders. They didn't quite get it right when they built this side. There's a big drop on this side of the house, okay? So be careful. This level is a little lower, okay? And if you come in this room, you would find all the things that they would process. This is ginger, that's cardamom. This is cinnamon. And this is the licorice, anisette. This is anisette. And I forgot what that one is. But here they would process all the stuff here. And they would sell it. But what I want to show you is very important. This is Africa, and this family were Dutch. So they came out of the Netherlands, okay? The slave ships, and you know the reason why you don't see all of America here is because it had not been developed. Now, this is the time of 1680, and when the Dutch were first starting, these slave ships would come around the coast of Africa. Most of my descendants are from Cameroon, Mali, Senegal, and Ghana, which is up in here. The slave ships came around the coast, but not only did it pick slaves up from here, Senegal, and Ghana, but it also went around to Madagascar. We had 2 slaves that knew weights and measures, and they were very intelligent, and they knew more than one language. The slave ships would come back across the Middle Passage here. Slaves were dropped off here in Brazil, all through here, Curacao, Barbados, and in Barbados is where they had a plantation. Cocoa, rum, you name it, was all here. So when they dropped off more slaves, they would replenish, say slaves died or whatever, and then they would come up through Jamaica, through the Bahamas, all the way up to New York. This is where the slaves that Mr. Phillips had would be bought and sold, were right here in Manhattan. Now his main house was in Manhattan, but do you remember in the 1990s when they did excavation in Lower Manhattan, and when they dug down, they found bones. When they found the bones, the skeleton bones had curved spines. That's when they knew that that was the African burial ground, because who would carry weight on your head of 200 pounds and it would curve your spine? If you go down to the South Street Seaport, you will find the African burial ground. And as the slaves would come across the ships, cross on the vessels, many of them would die. By the time they got to New York, if you couldn't feed 750 slaves, some of them would be dead by the time you arrived. So they had to bury them somewhere, and that's where they were buried, in Lower Manhattan. But it's amazing how, you put the pieces together and you see how the story unveils. But see, all of these ports were not open. I came from South Carolina, which is probably about up in here, and then you got North Carolina and you coming off the coast, okay? But that's why you don't see the rest of the ports open, which is probably St. John's Island, Baltimore, Philadelphia, all those places were not open. Now we're going to stroll along over here into the next room. And they call this the Calico influence here, because this was like the, this was the British. Now in this room, the two time periods, 1680 when that side was built, 1720 this side was built, 1750 Adolf passed away. In this room there was a man that sat with a quill pen, and he did inventory of every slave that was here. That's why we know the names of the slaves. Every chicken, every oxen, every sheep that was on this property, he did the inventory list. If you go into the New York Public Library, you will find 55 pages of the inventory belonging to this family. And those are the pens they wrote with, and that's a broom made by the Native Americans. That's how it looks as an antique. Now, you will look here, 1750 is when Adolf passed away. The year of transition, Adolf Phillips passed away, and this is how they were getting rid of the property from February to June of 1750. Now, if you look here, they're selling from his New York City house. They sold John, Sarah, Old Bess, and if you notice, she's a mulatto girl. Incidentally, that's what they call my father, a mulatto male. But, that's what they called them back then. But now we know it's biracial. But if you look here, the men, this is how they were selling them. Samson was sold to the Cartwright family for 75 pounds. I keep looking at my glasses. I don't have my glasses. But that's what they would sell a male slave for. Now, if you look lower, here's a little boy, Sam. That's his son. His son was sold by public auction. So therefore, he didn't go with his father, and he didn't go with his mother. And if you look here, Dina and suckling infant, if you're nursing your baby, the baby would go with you. But if the baby is 2 or 3 and he was not being nursed by the mother, he was sold separately as an individual. And how that happened, it's amazing, because you think about it, I'm 80, okay? If I was a slave born during that time and I was old, I could take care of these little children. I could raise them 2 and 3 and 4 until they become 6 years of age, and then they're sold off to slavery. But that would be my job as a slave, if I'm older, that I wouldn't have to work in the fields, but I could raise those children and give them the love that I had. So that's how the system of slavery worked. And wherever you have slaves, you're going to have an overseer, and his name was Mr. Artsy, and his office was right downstairs. So we're going to go downstairs to his office. I know I'm giving you a lot of information.
No, it's very.
I've been here, so I know the story of this.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
In this room is the room of Mr. Artsy. He was a Dutchman, and he took care of all the slaves, made sure they did what they were supposed to, and this is where he kept all the record. But what's interesting, someone came here and they told me that their family member lived on this property and died, and it was a Dutch name. So I was able to look, and it was right there. So I told them I could not give them the paper. You'd have to go over to the visitor center and get a copy there, or go to the New York Public Library, but I was not allowed to touch the inventory. That's why we have the ropes here. But you have all the Dutch maps over there, and here you will have, this is a map of Barbados. If anyone has ever gone to Barbados, no. If you go there, you will find Phillips Parish. This was owned by this family, and from here all the way through wherever you see the names, cocoa, rum, coffee, you had all free labor. So everything you were made was just pure profit. So that's why the slaves, some were dropped off here, and what they did, and they brought a new overseer, and then they would leave here and go all the way straight up to New York, and some of them were sold. But, oh, I see another, I have to get out here quickly because another tour is coming. I try to get so much information. But Mr. Artsy was here. This was his job. He knew, he heard the women churning the butter. So he knew what they were doing, and he would look right out this window here, and he could see the men working on the gristmill. The slave men would be loading the little small boats that come around, or either they were churning the, what else were they, the wheat and the corn. And this little body of water goes right around. 5 minutes, you're out on the Hudson River. So this is why it's in the waterways, okay? So that's why you would see, and he knew what was going on. And his wife was very instrumental because she was the midwife, and she would help deliver the babies. But if you notice, the fireplace is different on this side. This was built 1720, and that side was built in 1680. That's why it's the whole time period is different. Now we're going to go quickly here before they run me out. They say, Dolores, you talk so much. But in this room, this is another fireplace. You see how it's all the way, and remember the beams, and we have the old floors up on top. Now this room was a room where they could entertain Mr. Artsy. He could entertain all of the tenant farmers that were here, or Mr. Phillips would come here and he would entertain his guests. That's why they could drink wine and they could play cards, and they would have a good old time right here. Those two chairs were just for the slave boys would sit there. They called slave weight chairs, okay? And they wouldn't have to go to the window to call the slave children if they needed water or whatever, because they would be sitting there while they entertained. Now this is the last room. This is the front of the house. And in this room here you will find the fireplace. This is one of the largest rooms. But this is the front door of the house. What you saw upstairs, see this? This is a Dutch kast, but upstairs was an original, and this is a reproduction, okay? That's the difference. That's why it's not behind the chain. And if you look out here, you can see the sample of the gardens. And this is the way the slaves did it, because they had everything on raised beds. It was easy for the children to irrigate it, to put water on. They could bring the buckets, because they didn't have any hoses back there. Buckets of water, and they could water everything that they grew. And slavery in New York ended in 1827. But Mr. Phillips passed in 1750. After he passed, then, and they were trying to liquidate all the property, but what happened was some of the people one of the nephews held on to this house and held on to the other house. But the property was confiscated, because during that time, like 1750, 1760, you're getting into the time for the war, okay? Because many of the Dutch were on the wrong side. Many of them had to get out of this area, many of them fled to Canada. So the property was confiscated when the last nephew had it. And when that was confiscated, went into 249 different owners. And the largest owner that held part of the property was the Rockefellers. And that's why we have 26 acres left as opposed to 52,000 acres of land. So all the land that was here, Briarcliff, Ossining, you just named the towns here, now all the people own the property and exchange hands. But we have this bit right on the water, so we're able to use it as a museum to show people what history was like back in the days. But we can't have all that, because all of that belongs to somebody else now. But Rockefeller has given so much property for the museum, and especially Sunnyside and all the other places that we have, and they're all just about on the Hudson River. Anyway, but thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoyed it. I tried to get it out fast.
Oh, no, that was great.
Excellent.
But thank you so much.